Hey everybody, Deathblade here. I am again in this new sort of setup in like the corner of the living room. Hopefully the lighting and the sound is better. I'm still working on trying to get a background. I look forward to anybody who has any feedback on the quality of the video. I'm here with another Chinese fantasy novel FAQ where I try to make Chinese fantasy novels more accessible and understandable both to newer readers and to longtime fans. Today I'm talking about two different terms that I think get used in a lot of different novels, but specifically have come up in some of the projects that I've translated. I think this video is more addressed to people who have been following my translations or who have or are reading my translations, because I saw a lot of questions about some of these terms in my second major project. So my first major project was I Shall Seal the Heavens, which probably in the edited release, which is coming hopefully next year, the title is actually going to change. For the overall series as a whole, we're going to keep the I Shall Seal the Heavens as part of it. So anyway, that was my first major project. My second project, which I'm, as of this video, still working on, is called A Will Eternal. And they both feature a character who does what's essentially Chinese alchemy or creating medicinal pills or magical or immortal pills using a pill furnace. But in the I Shall Seal the Heavens series, I translated the characters like, I don't want to say it's a title. Well, it was used as a title. His profession, let's say, if you're talking like in role-playing game terms, as an alchemist. So he was an alchemist, and there was a lot of alchemy, especially in the early parts of the novel. There was an entire whole subsection of the series which was all about alchemy, and everybody really loved it. Then the other character in the next series that I translated, I called him an apothecary as opposed to an alchemist. So what's the difference between those two? Some people were like, why did you change the name when they're both doing the same thing? Well, first of all, let's address that. The reason why I called one of the characters, Meng Hao, the reason why I called him an alchemist, and the other character, Bai Xiaochun, the reason I called him an apothecary is because the author used two different terms. So that's why I used two different terms. The author did not use the same term to describe Bai Xiaochun in his profession or his whatever he was doing. He did not use the same term as he used in the other novel. Now, what are these two different terms? Well, the first one, alchemist, basically, now again, there are different ways to translate all of these different terms, but what I translated as alchemist in Chinese has the character for a pill, like a medicinal pill, and then next to it has a character which can mean teacher or master or something. So essentially it means like a master of making pills. And now what about apothecary? Well, very similar. It also used that same character for master or teacher or something like that. But instead of the character for pill, it used the character for medicine. So the one for Meng Hao in the one novel was basically a pill maker, and then the other one was a medicine maker, or master or teacher, whatever kind of, however you would want to parse those different characters. And so that's why I translated one as alchemist and one as apothecary, because the apothecary I envisioned as being more focused on making medicine specifically, and in the novel A Will Eternal of Bai Xiaochun, that was the term that the author originally used to describe what he was doing in his title and things like that, was a maker of medicine as opposed to the maker of pills. Now, this alchemist term, that has a lot of connection to ancient Chinese history, because Chinese alchemy is a real thing. Just do a Google search for Chinese alchemy. You can find Wikipedia articles and all sorts of other stuff. Throughout history, the Chinese alchemists were very interested in creating these like magical or immortal pills that would grant them long life or eternal life or things like that. So throughout history, the alchemists, which is a real thing in history at least, I would say seem to be more focused on things that nowadays we would consider to be superstitious or mythological in nature, as opposed to people who are making medicine. Now, traditional Chinese medicine is very similar in some ways to the ways that they would make medicinal pills. Some of the ingredients are the same. And so that's why when I originally translated these two different terms, I went with alchemist and apothecary. Now, just to go into a little bit further detail, for all intents and purposes, in the novels, I'm not talking about in real life, but in the novels and in these two specific novels, it's exactly the same. The characters do the same things. You could switch alchemist with apothecary in Chinese, and it would actually make no difference. They basically make medicine in the same way. There are some very minor differences in, the process and the results, but for all intents and purposes, it's almost exactly the same. And in addition to that, later in the novel, A Will Eternal, the author actually switches and goes back to using the term alchemist a lot. Not every time, he kind of goes back and forth. So this author tends to do that. Sometimes he will try to make something different. He'll change the naming of something or whatever, and then kind of slip back into sort of what he originally intended it to be. So imagine you're writing like a novel, and you're doing a lot of content, and you're like, okay, my guy's gonna be a warrior, but instead I'm gonna call him a fighter. That'll make him seem different. And so at first you kind of start calling him a fighter. Then you kind of go off and sort of like do a lot of other content that doesn't relate to that. Then you come back, and by the time you come back, you kind of forgot about that decision you made to call him a fighter, and then you go back to calling him a warrior. So that's the kind of thing that happened with A Will Eternal, which was when he first started writing it, he was thinking, I'm gonna make this different and kind of a little unique. And then by the time he kind of went into the novel, several hundred chapters, he kind of started forgetting about that and just went back to what he originally would have called it to begin with. So I hope this helps give you a little bit of insight, first into the terms apothecary and alchemist, but also a little bit into the mindset of the authors and how their process works. If any of you have ever tried to write original content of your own and done it over a long period of time, I'm sure you'll find that it's hard to remember what you were thinking several months ago. I don't think it matters whether you're writing, 1 chapter a day, 2 chapters a day, 1 chapter a week, 2 chapters a week. After you go for a really long time, it's easy to forget some of the things that you thought about before. So a lot of the Chinese web novel authors will keep big outlines where they, have all their notes and stuff like that. If you're not paying close attention, if you're one of those authors and you're not paying very close attention to certain terms, then it would be easy to mix up the terms from one chapter to another, especially when they're separated by dozens or hundreds of chapters. So that's it for this episode of Chinese Fantasy Novel FAQs. If you're interested in this kind of content, if you'd like to learn more about Chinese fantasy novels and more about what the terms mean, the behind the scenes kind of thing, please subscribe. You can support me on Patreon. And that's it for this video, so I'll see you next time. God's love.